Hello, welcome back to Math with Patrick. Today is January 23rd, and we have the 23rd problem from this Daily Epsilon calendar to try to solve. Well, let's try it out. The sum of x consecutive numbers is 529, and their average is also x. Okay, so we probably need to solve for x, and today's date is the 23rd, and that's going to be today's answer. Though it's up to us to figure out why exactly is 23 the right answer. Let's see. Let's just think about the first part for a sec. The sum of some consecutive numbers. So consecutive numbers are ones that just you count up by one and get to the next one. So for example, the sum of these consecutive numbers would be 9 because these make a 6. 6 plus 3 altogether makes a 9. Well, certainly the sum of these three consecutive numbers is not 529. I would either need to add up significantly larger numbers or many more numbers than just 3. One of the two. So I either need bigger numbers or I need more numbers. Well, I could try something silly, and what if I found like two numbers that add up to 529 that are still consecutive? This probably won't work, but if I take half of 529, let me just do some long division right here. Looks like I got 264 and 265. So technically, I could also find the sum of these consecutive numbers, and I do get 529. But then their average would be just in the middle of them, or 264 and a half. So, okay, I have two consecutive numbers here, and their average is way big. So I'm guessing I need to be somewhere in the middle where my numbers are fairly big and I have a somewhat large amount of numbers, but I can't be this extreme where my numbers are huge and I only have two of them. I'm going to take a look at this 529 and I'm noticing that it's odd. And so I'm thinking about what about that list of consecutive numbers and what if I consider them to be just odd or even for now? If I say I constrain myself to just having an odd amount of numbers, then either I could start with an even or start with an odd, and then the lists will keep on going even, odd, even, odd, even, so on and so forth. If I start with an even number, then I have 3 evens and 2 odds. Well, these 2 odds, when I add them together, will become another even number. And I know that if you add up a bunch of even numbers, it'll still be even. Okay, so this tells me that this one is not a possibility. Or in other words, I can't have an odd amount of numbers unless I start with an odd one. Or I guess I could think about it as like having an odd one in the middle. All right, I made a little table that just kind of shows those thoughts, where if I have an odd number of addends or things being added together, I need to have my first term be odd, or else my sum will be even, it won't be 529. And then if I have an even number of addends, so that would be like 4 in my list of consecutive numbers, or 6, or 8, well, when I take their average, that'll be this number right here in between two whole number values. And I know that x is a whole number because I have x consecutive numbers. I can't have like 4.5 numbers in my list. So x has to be a whole number, and x is also the average. So I know that I can't be taking the average of an even number of terms, or else my average is going to be something and a half. So I don't really need to worry about whether or not the first term is even or odd. Either way, I'm not going to get a whole number average, and I need one for x. Well, at least now I know my list has an odd amount of numbers, and it starts with an odd number, or it ends in an odd number, or there's an odd number in the middle, however you want to think about it. Maybe it'd be easiest to think about that number in the middle, because I am also talking about an average. So let's pretend I have some amount of terms in my sum. Not sure how many there are, so that's why I'm doing those dot dot dots. And I'm going to have some number in the middle. But then when I add them all up and divide it by the amount of numbers I have, my average will be this middle number. So the average is x, just because it's in the very middle. And I mean, if I add them all up, you can imagine that this is like x minus, I don't know, k x plus k. I'm just making up some number k. And when I add these together in my sum, those k's will cancel out. And so it's effectively like I'm just adding up x a whole bunch of times and dividing it by the amount of times I added x. So their average is x. It's just that middle number. And then the sum, I would need to add up all of these terms together. And as I mentioned before, when I add like the low and the high numbers together, it's basically as if all of these were just x's. So I'm adding up x to itself a whole bunch of times. And from the problem statement, I'm actually told how many numbers there are in my sum. There's x consecutive numbers. So I have x consecutive x's, or in other words, I'm adding x to itself x times. And so this right here is just x times x, kind of by the definition of multiplication, because when you multiply something, you add it to itself over and over again that amount of times. Like 6 times 4 is the same as like 6 plus 6 plus 6 4 times over, or you could do it with the 4s, you could add that up 6 times over. So that's what I'm doing here. All of these x's added up, I have x amount of them, and so my sum is x times x. It tells me that my sum is 529. So I'm just looking for some number out there. When I multiply it to itself, I get 529. Well, now we're just looking for square numbers. This is x squared equals 529. And I've memorized my squares up to like a certain amount. Like I know that 21 squared is 441. But after that, I kind of like, I just haven't memorized them. I know that this 441 is a bit too small, so I could try 22 squared. I'll do some long multiplication over here, multiply the 2's, multiply the other 2's, multiply all these 2's, and I get 484. Okay, it's a bit too small. So if I try 23 times 23, I'll get a 9 and a 6, a placeholder 0, and then a 6 and a 4. Adding this up, 9, 12, carry the 1. Hey, there it is, 529. So I know that this x has to be 23. Sweet. There's the answer to this problem. So if we took 23 numbers all lined up and put 23 in the middle of them, then we will have 23 consecutive numbers. Their average is 23, and adding them all up gives us 529. Okay, we're all done. Thanks for coming along. I hope you enjoyed my way of solving it. I feel like that parity analysis at the start, where we're determining if things were like odd or even, might have been like a different strategy that you might not have considered. So hope you enjoyed that part. All right, I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.